I want you to imagine a city. The streets are laid out in a perfect, rigid grid like pattern, similar to the avenues of modern Manhattan. The streets are wide and oriented specifically to catch the wind like a natural air conditioning system, and the corners are set at a precise 90-degree angles. The houses lining the streets are uniform, and they are constructed from standardized fire-baked bricks. Let's zoom into one of these modest homes. Inside, a woman is getting ready for her day. She is sitting before a polished bronze mirror, carefully applying lipstick made from red ochre and lining her eyes with gold. In the adjacent room, a man finishes shaving with a curved copper razor. He washes his face in a sink, and then, here's a detail that should stop you in your tracks. He uses a flush toilet. That toilet empties into a chute which connects to a covered city-wide sewer system running beneath the street, carrying waste away from the living areas to a centralized dump far outside the city walls. You might think I'm describing London in the late 19th century, or perhaps Rome at its imperial peak, but I'm not. I'm describing the banks of the Indus River almost 5,000 years ago. When we think of ancient India, we usually imagine saints and yogis. We hear the echoes of Sanskrit chants, and we visualize the epic thunderous battles of Mahabharata. But long before the first Vedic chant was ever sung, long before the first temple were raised for a god, or the first tomb was sealed for a king, there was a civilization that did not seem to care about any of that. They did not care about monumental tombs. They cared about plumbing. They did not focus on glorifying conquerors. They focused on trade and urban design. They were the Indus Valley Civilization, the Atlantis that was actually real. Hello, namaste, hola, guten tag, ni hao, bonjour, and hello in all the beautiful ways people greet around the world. Welcome to the 5th episode of Sip of the Iceberg, and today we are going to talk about the marvelous ancient civilization, the Indus Valley Civilization. Indus Valley Civilization was located across what is today northwest India, Pakistan, and northeast Afghanistan. It flourished around 5,000 years ago, from approximately 3300 BC to around 1300 BC. In terms of territory, it covered more than 1,000,000 square kilometers. To put that in a perspective, that is the land mass similar in size to the modern-day South American country of Peru or the Central African country Chad, and roughly twice the size of Texas. At its height, it was home to over 5 million people. In the ancient world, we talk about the cradle of urban civilization. This cradle held three major players: the Mesopotamia, located in modern-day Iraq, which existed between approximately 4000 BC to 539 BC; the ancient Egyptian civilization, along the banks of Nile River, which existed between approximately 3100 BC to 30 BC, and the Indus Valley Civilization, the eastern anchor of this ancient triad. While the Sumerian city of Uruk in Mesopotamia is often cited as the first true city, and the Egypt is famous for its continuity, the Indus Valley was the most extensive, and our understanding of it is undergoing a radical transformation right now. For a long time, we thought Mohenjo-daro was the oldest and the largest site in the Indus Valley, but new excavation in Haryana, India have rewritten the timelines entirely. Even though the golden age of Indus Valley civilization is considered to be around 4,500 years ago, we now look into these sites like Virana, where radiocarbon dating pushes early settlements back to roughly 7600 BC, which is nearly 10,000 years ago. And we look to Rakhegari, which is now estimated to be the largest site of all in Indus Valley, with roots going back to 6000 BC or 8000 years ago. So this suggests that early agricultural settlements of Indus Valley could be much older than the Mesopotamian early settlements. But the biggest rewriting of history concerns the backbone of the civilization itself. Ancient civilizations are built around water sources. For example, Mesopotamia is built between the Tigris and the Euphrates River. The word Mesopotamia literally means between two rivers. Egypt is the gift of the Nile. And for decades, historians believed the Indus Valley Civilization was no different, relying solely on the Indus River or the Sindhu River. In Sanskrit, Sindhu simply means river, ocean, or stream. It was the life force, the breadbasket, providing water for irrigation and settlements, offering a predictable annual flood that deposited rich black silt that helped in agriculture. However, there is a ghost in the story, a second river that was lost to the time until very recently. This is where the new science comes in. Recent studies backed by satellite imagery from NASA and ISRO have identified a massive paleo channel, a dried up riverbed running parallel to the Indus River. This geological scar aligns perfectly with the Ghaggar Hakra riverbed, and many scholars now identify this as the legendary Saraswati River, a mighty waterway mentioned frequently and reverently in the Rig Veda. This discovery changes the geography of our history books. It turns out that over 60% of the discovered Indus sites are actually located along the dried bed of the Saraswati River. Many believe that this wasn't just an Indus civilization, it was actually a twin river civilization, the Indus-Saraswati River civilization. The implications are massive because it connects the archaeological reality of the Indus Valley with the literary reality of the Vedic text in ways we are just beginning to understand. To their neighbors, the Mesopotamians, these people were known as Meluha, the masters of the sea, the people who brought exotic goods from the east. If you were a time traveler visiting the ancient world, you would visit Egypt to see the pyramids, but you would want to live in the Indus Valley. The reason is simple: hygiene. In South Asia today, there are still rural areas without proper toilet facilities. In Europe, widespread use of the flush toilets and sewer system did not become a standard until the late 19th century. Europeans were using chamber pots and throwing waste into the streets for thousands of years. The Indus people, however, had solved this problem almost 4,500 years ago. Imagine walking into a home in the city of Harappa city. Almost every house had access to a private well or a nearby public one. Inside, you would find the distinct bathing areas with paved floors sloped perfectly to drain water. The latrines were connected to drainage chutes, basically a gravity-fed flush system that fed into the street drains, but these weren't open, foul-smelling ditches. The street drains were covered with brick slabs or limestone blocks to trap the smell. They even had manholes at regular intervals so the city workers could inspect and clean them. This demonstrates that they highly prioritize hygiene and sanitation. But they did not just care about sanitation, they were also stylish. We often assume ancient people were rough and utilitarian, but the artifact tells a different story. The city of Chanhudaro appears to have been a dedicated manufacturing hub for crafts and cosmetics. If you looked at the vanity table of an Indus woman, you would find tools that would not look out of place today. She used red ochre for lipstick and rouge, She applied eyeliner using antimony sticks. They also had bronze mirrors, ivory combs, and grooming tools like copper razor, tweezers, and even ear cleaners. This was a society obsessed with ornamentation. They wore bangles and necklaces made up of gold, silver, copper, faience, shell, and semi-precious stones like agate, turquoise, and their signature export, carnelian. We see this fashion in their art. The famous priest king statue from Mohenjo-daro wears a headband and has a perfectly trimmed groomed beard. And the dancing girl bronze statue stands with a confident sassy posture. One hand on her hip, her head tilted back, and her arm stacked high with bangles. Whether she was a dancer, a goddess, or a regular woman, she shows us a society where women had a distinct aesthetic and perhaps a strong social standing. They dressed in cotton, wool, linen, and possibly silk. In fact, the Indus Valley was the pioneer of cotton cultivation, giving the world the fabric that dominates our life even today. The most striking thing about the Indus Valley is not what they built, but how they built it. In 1856, the British engineers were building the Lahore-Karachi Railway and needed ballast for the tracks. Near the village of Harappa, they found mountains of perfect hard-baked bricks. Assuming these were from a ruined city of much later Maurya Empire or a Buddhist site, they raided the ruins and used those 4,000 year-old bricks to build 93 miles or 150 kilometers of railway track. It was indeed a tragedy where the British engineers prioritized logical efficiency over historical preservation. But it really makes you think how great the quality of the bricks were that British engineer thought it was from a recent ruin. While other civilizations were building monuments to showcase their grandiosity, the Indus engineers were focused on standardization. Everywhere you go, from the biggest city to the smallest village, they used fire-baked bricks that follow a perfect 4:2:1 ratio of length, width, and height. They developed a standardized system of weight based on a binary system, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, and so on. A merchant in Harappa used the exact same weight standard as a merchant 500 miles away in Lothal. This implies something profound. To have standardized bricks and weights across a territory twice the size of Texas without telephones or internet suggests a highly efficient, perhaps centralized system of governance or a deeply integrated guild system. Their cities were masterpieces of order. Streets intersected at right angles. Residential blocks were clearly defined. There was clear zoning for distinct activities. The walls were thick, designed to insulate against the heat and protect against floods. Unlike the organic growth of medieval European cities, which looked like a tangled ball of yarn, Indus cities looked like they were very well planned and designed for urban efficiency. If you look closely, the Indus Valley actually breaks the rules of ancient history. If you look at Mesopotamia, you see the ziggurats, a massive temple dedicated to patron god, towering over the city. You see palaces for kings who hoarded wealth. If you look at Egypt, the disparity is even more staggering. They built these giant pyramids as royal tombs for the pharaohs. Even more fascinating is the tomb of King Tutankhamun. When Howard Carter opened Tutankhamun's sarcophagus in 1923, he did not just find a mummified body. He found a treasury that defies comprehension. The boy king, who died at 19, was buried in 3 nested coffins. The innermost coffin was made up of solid gold, 110 kilograms or 243 pounds of it. Just that one coffin is worth millions of dollars in raw melt value, ignoring the priceless artistry. On his face was the famous death mask, beaten from 2 distinct layers of high-carat gold, weighing another 11 kilograms or 25 pounds. and inlaid with lapis lazuli, quartz, obsidian, amazonite, and turquoise. It is estimated that there was around 250 kilograms or 550 pounds of gold used in his tomb. The tomb was also packed with chariots, statues, jewelry, and furniture. Literally tons of wealth taken out of circulation and buried in the dark, solely to ensure the immortality of one single person. In these civilizations, the surplus wealth of society was funneled to the top 1%. The king was a god, treated with reverence, immortalized by mummification and lavish send-offs while the common peasant toiled in the mud. But in the Indus Valley, we find none of that. There are no palaces, there are no grand temples, there are no monumental tombs, and there are absolutely no hoards of royal wealth. So who was in charge? The architecture suggests an egalitarian ethos. The citadel area in the cities contained public structures, a great bath, likely for public ritual or hygiene, granaries for food security, and assembly halls. The wealth seems to have been distributed much more evenly than in other Bronze Age civilizations. The jewelry and high-quality pottery weren't just for the elites. They are found in modest homes too. This has led historians to speculate wildly. Was it a democracy? A republican governed by a council of elders? Maybe a merchant oligarchy where trade guilds set the rules? Or perhaps a theocracy where priests rule through the ritual rather than force? We don't know. But the evidence suggests a society that prioritized the common good, public health, food storage, and flood protection over the glorification of a single ruler. We tend to view history as a highlight reel of wars and wonders. We forget that 99% of the time, history is just regular people doing regular things. In the Indus Valley, we can see the humanity in the artifacts. We find toys, a lot of them. There are whistling birds made out of terracotta, toy carts with moving wheels, toy boats, and even monkey and a string toys that climb when you pull the cord. A society that mass produces toys is a society that values its children and has the leisure time to play. We can even reconstruct the dinner table. Lipid analysis of pottery gives us the menu. Unlike the common stereotype that ancient Indians were mostly vegetarians, they ate beef and buffalo a lot, along with mutton, pork, and poultry. They ate wheat, barley, lentils, and chickpeas. They enjoyed fruits like dates, figs, melons, and grapes, and they liked their food with a kick. They used mustard, ginger, turmeric, garlic, cinnamon, and black pepper. They were essentially making the earliest forms of curry. To wash it down, there is evidence of beer, brewed beverages, and palm toddy. They played games too. We have found dice almost identical to the modern ones, maze games, and board games that look like early forms of chess. But the most controversial aspect of the humanity is the apparent pacifism. In other civilizations, you find stockpiles of swords, crushed skulls, and murals glorifying conquest. In Indus Valley, we find mostly tools. The spears and arrowheads they had were likely for hunting or basic defense. There are no depictions of armies, no scenes of prisoners of war, no kings boasting about piling up bodies. Some historians argue that this is an argument from ignorance. Just because we haven't found the weapons does not mean they did not exist. It's not like they had no violence at all. They had domestic violence like any other societies. But the distinction is that unlike other civilizations, Indus Valley did not glorify violence and war. But the contrast is undeniable. It suggests a civilization that managed conflict through trade, negotiations, or social pressure rather than brute force. Indus Valley flourished and prospered, but they did not live in a bubble. The Indus Valley was the engine of a globalized Bronze Age economy. In Gujarat, India, at a site called Lothal, dating back to 2400 BC, we find a brick-lined raised basin. It had an inlet and outlet channel and a lock gate system. Advanced hydraulic engineering that allowed ships to enter at high tides and stayed afloat during the low tide. This was the world's first tidal dockyard. From here, the ships of Meluha sailed. They were expert navigators, mastering the monsoon winds and ocean currents. They traded with Dilmun civilization, which is in modern-day Bahrain, the Magan civilization, which is in UAE and Oman, and the Mesopotamia, and also indirectly with Egypt. If you stood on the docks of Lothal, you would see crates of their signature export, carnelian beads. These were the Gucci of the Bronze Age. Indus craftsmen developed a specialized drilling technique to create long, slender carnelian beads that were highly prized in the Mesopotamian cities of Ur and Babylon. They used earnestite drills capable of boring holes barely a minimum in diameter. We can call it an ancient form of nanotechnology. Along with beads, they exported soft, breathable cotton fabrics. They also exported cedar and teak timber and exotic animals like buffaloes and monkeys. In return, ships brought in raw materials to feed their workshops. Lapis lazuli arrived from the mountains of Afghanistan. Gold came from South India and Iran. High-quality copper was shipped from the Oman Peninsula. And bitumen, a natural tar for waterproofing bathtubs, sink basins, and their great bath, was imported from Mesopotamia. We even have some suggestions of an Indus diaspora. An Akkadian cylindrical seal belonged to a man named Shu Ilisu, who is described as a translator of the Meluhan language. Some experts also suggest that this implies there were Indus expatriates living and working in Mesopotamia, acting as a cultural and commercial bridge. Despite all this physical evidence, the Indus scripts still remain a mystery, as we haven't been able to decipher it. In Egypt, ancient hieroglyphics were deciphered in 1820s. We found the Rosetta Stone, broken slab of basalt that had the same text written in three scripts: hieroglyphics, Demotic, and the ancient Greek. Because the scholars knew ancient Greek, they could work backwards, realizing that hieroglyphics weren't just pictures, but phonetic sounds. That single discovery unlocked 3,000 years of Egyptian history. And in Mesopotamia, we had the Behistun inscription, carved high on a cliff face in a modern-day Iran. It was a massive bragging billboard for King Darius the Great, written in Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian. By decoding the Old Persian, scholars in the 19th century were able to crack the cuneiform code, allowing the clay tablets of Sumer and Babylon to speak again. But for the Indus Valley, we are still clueless. We have found over 4,000 inscriptions, including the big billboard-like inscription in Dola Vira, but we have no Rosetta Stone. We have no bilingual text. The script is pictographic, consisting of hundreds of symbols. The inscriptions are very short. The average is 5 signs and the longest is only 26. We don't know the underlying language family. Is it Proto-Dravidian, the ancestor of Tamil and Telugu, or is it a distinct extinct language? Without that key, their literature, their philosophy, and their names remain locked away. We also struggle to name their gods. The famous Pasupati still depicts a figure seated in a cross-legged yogic pose, wearing a horn headdress and surrounded by animals like the elephant, tiger, rhino, and buffalo. This is often called the Proto-Shiva, the lord of the animals. We also find terracotta figurines of women, possibly fertility goddess, and phallic stones that suggest a precursor to Shiva Linga worship. But we have to keep in mind that while it may be widely accepted, it is highly debated theory among scholars. Some scholars argue that the figure might be purely shamanistic. The most common image on their seal is one-horned bull. It is likely a unicorn, but probably represents a powerful clan or a governing elite rather than a magical creature. While highly debatable, many people hypothesize that the sapling of Hinduism sprouted in the Indus Valley, which was probably watered and tended to grow into the beautiful tree that is the Vedas by the Indo-Aryan migration. Around 1800 BCE, the civilization began to decline. By 1300 BCE, it was gone. But the way it ended sets it apart from its peers. For example, Mesopotamia's history is a bloodbath of conquests. The Sumerians were conquered by the Akkadians, who were conquered by the Babylonians, then the Assyrians, and finally the Neo-Babylonians. Their story ends violently in 539 BC when Cyrus the Great of Persia marched in and ended their independence. Egypt's story is one of the slow erosion culminating in annexation. After thousands of years of sovereignty, they were ruled by the Greeks or Ptolemies and finally fell in 30 BC. The death of Cleopatra the 7th marked the end of ancient Egypt as it was swallowed whole by the Roman Empire. But the Indus Valley had no such dramatic finale. There was no Persian invasion, no Roman legion marching on the capital. Their enemy wasn't a man, it was nature. It wasn't like Thanos snapping the Indus people out of existence. It was a slow burning apocalypse. It wasn't one bad day, it was 5 generations of people realizing the water wasn't coming back. They seem to have many decades and centuries long droughts according to new studies that might have robbed the Indus Valley of its life force. The primary culprit was the 4.2 kiloyear event, a global climatic shift toward aridification. A 900-year-long mega drought weakened the monsoons. Simultaneously, tectonic shifts and monsoon pattern shift caused the Saraswati River to change course and eventually dry up completely at around 1800 BCE. Also, the Indus River was significantly weakened, making it no longer viable for large-scale civilization. Just imagine the scale of that tragedy. As the rain fell, the gravity-fed irrigation system stopped working. They ran out of surplus food, and the trade boats could no longer sail through the shallow waters. The cities became unstable. You can't support 50,000 people in a city if the river is dry. People did not just die, but instead they were forced to abandon their home and move to new settlements where there was no drought. There was a massive migration from the Indus-Saraswati basin towards the east to the lush plains of Ganges River. They abandoned urban life, the plumbing, the breaks, the grades, and returned to rural village-based living. As the water sources shrank, waterborne diseases like cholera and typhoid spread. We also see skeletal evidence of leprosy and tuberculosis. The urban life was no longer sustainable. For a long time, history books taught us that Indo-Aryans from the north invaded and destroyed the Indus cities. This has been largely debunked now. There is no archaeological layer of ash, no mass graves with trauma marks that would indicate a massacre. The bodies found in the streets were likely squatters who died of diseases or famine long after the city was in decline. A 2019 DNA study of a woman from Rakhigarhi showed 0-step or Indo-Aryan DNA, proving the people of the Indus were genetically distinct. It wasn't an invasion, but most likely a migration that happened after the cities has already collapsed. The period that followed from 1500 BC to 500 BCE is known as the Vedic period. It was a stark contrast. The early Vedic period were pastoral, semi-nomadic herders who lived in a water and dove huts, not brick mansions. They forgot how to ride, how to make bricks, and how to build plumbing. It would take another 1,000 years for India to see large cities again. However, they brought a rich oral tradition, the Vedas. The Riga Veda, Samaveda, Yajurveda, and Atharva Veda focused on philosophy, rituals, and the nature of the cosmos. It is believed that the Indo-Aryan people from Pontic Caspian steppe, which is located in modern-day Kazakhstan, Ukraine, and Russia, migrated to the Indian subcontinent during that time. And it is believed that the Indo-Aryan migration heralded the beginning of the Vedic period. It is also believed that the integration of Indo-Aryan people with the local population is also responsible for the Vedas, the Sanskrit language, and the Hindu religion as we know today. This era solidified the caste system, which began as a division of labor but calcified into rigid hierarchy. It has still been one of the major factors of conflicts, inequality, and discrimination in the South Asian communities. The Vedic texts are full of battles, chariots, and warrior ethics. The Mahabharata, set in the late Vedic period, is a saga of power struggles and moral dilemmas. It was a shift from a civilization of material comfort and civic order to a civilization of metaphysical inquiry and social stratification. If you were to list the features of both Indus Valley and Vedic period, I think most people without extensive knowledge of ancient history would think Vedic period is much more ancient than the Indus Valley because of how the Vedic period does not have urban life or advanced plumbing. But I guess it would be more accurate to say that the Indus Valley was much more advanced for its time. As we look back at the Indus Valley, we are forced to look forward. We tend to view progress as linear. We assume we will just keep getting better, building higher, flying faster. But the Indus Valley proves that progress is fragile. You can have flush toilets and global trade and then lose them for 1,000 years. This makes me wonder, what if there are more ancient civilizations that we haven't discovered yet? Maybe some even more advanced than the Indus Valley, buried somewhere underground or under the sea. Our current civilization could decline just like the Indus Valley. Imagine the world 5,000 years from now. What will remain of us? Our skyscrapers will be rusted skeletons. Our current method of record keeping is digital data storage, which is very volatile and requires electricity. Unlike clay tablets and stone seals, our hard drives will turn into a hunk of rusted metals. Future archaeologists might find a layer of plastic, radioactive isotopes, and stainless steel. They might find the ruins of New York or Mumbai submerged underwater due to climate change. The Indus people did not leave us with the name of the kings. They did not leave us the dates of the battles. They did not leave us statues of conquerors standing over the vanquished. They left us their drains. They left us their toys. They left us their weights and measures. Maybe that is the ultimate lesson. Perhaps their legacy is not about being remembered in the way Ozymandias wanted to be remembered. Perhaps their legacy is simply that for 1,000 years they figured out how to live well. They figured out how to feed their children, keep their streets clean, and coexist in relative peace. Maybe the greatest achievement is not building a pyramid that glorifies the king for millennia. Maybe the great achievement is building a flush toilet with proper sewer system that makes the life of an everyday Joe hygienic and convenient. The Indus Valley did not go extinct. It was a de-urbanization. The people did not disappear. They migrated east towards the Ganges plain and south towards the peninsula. The cities died, but the civilization evolved, planting the seeds for the India we know today. The Atlantis did not sink, it just moved house. And with that, I think we are at the end of this episode. I hope you guys like this episode, and I will see you guys in the next one. Until then, sayonara fellow Earthicans!